Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the AlphaWarrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the AlphaWarrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
When I started MyPillow, it was just a problem solution, one product company. Well, since then, with the help of my dedicated employees, we now have hundreds of products, some you might not even know about. To get the word out, we're having a $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use MyPillows, $25. MyPillow sandals, $25. And for the first time ever, our 6-pack towel sets, You guessed it, just $25. Our brand new 4-pack dish towels, $25. And I've never done this before. Premium My Pillows with all new Giza fabric, any size, any loft level, even king size for only $25. And there's so much more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code for our $25 extravaganza. Order $75 and over. Your entire order ships absolutely free.
All right, you guys, remember, these are the people that support this podcast. AlphaLightsGold.com, America's favorite mustache, and some new ones down in the description. You'll see scrolling across the bottom of the screen. But I know why you guys are here, because it's Wednesday night. It's Operation Gladio time. You got your glasses on. So let me bring the woman you really want to hear from tonight. Colonel, how are you doing, man?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. We've had a busy weekend.
Yeah. It's very busy, actually.
It is. Well, one is, man, you are becoming very, very popular, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. I'm like, at what point is it okay for me to start being possessively jealous? Like, when do I get to be?
When you start paying me, you can be jealous.
there we go, you guys. Start dropping in those Rumble rants. Let's make Alpha a billionaire so I can make the Colonel rich. Colonel, what do you have in store for us today?
Okay, so we're going to talk about a combination of different things, but we're going to focus not necessarily on the coup itself in Indonesia, because I think we'll probably have to have a part 2, because there was a coup in Indonesia. There's a coup everywhere, right? That's the whole purpose of Operation Gladio. And so basically this, I have been corresponding with an Australian professor who wrote a book. His name's Greg Polgrain. And just so everybody can see it, this is one of his books, JFK and Allen Dulles versus Allen Dulles. And the battleground in this particular case was Indonesia. And it's interesting from the perspective that each one of these books adds another flavor. For example, when I was doing the book review of Major Gannis, who had bought all of the Otto Skorzeny papers, and his kind of avenue on the whole JFK assassination, which of course was an Operation Gladio as well, was that Otto Skorzeny played a pivotal role because he was the NATO trainer for the forces, and he brought in Lyman Lemmetzger, who wrote Operation Northwood. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, that was the plan to dress up people that lived in America to look like Castro army and bomb a bunch of places in the United States and pretend that it was Castro, so we could justify going in a full-scale invasion and coupping Castro. So that same guy showed up in during World War II in Europe, doing logistics for the OSS, which I thought, that's really weird. Then he also later, after he authored Northwood and Kennedy thought he was crazy and disapproved it, rightfully so, reassigned him to be the NATO commander, obviously not realizing that NATO was responsible for Operation Gladio. And so he was in charge during the time when Otto Skorzeny and some of his trained assassins that belonged to the OAS were in Dallas, right? So he had that angle of showing us that it had a lot to do with the Operation Gladio, if you will. And there's people that cover it from Kennedy was insisting that Israel disclose and allow the U.S. to investigate their nuclear program, right? So that's been covered. But I had never heard this angle, and it involves Indonesia. And it starts back in 1859. We got to lay a little bit of groundwork for this to make a lot of sense. So back in 1859, J.D. Rockefeller creates what is referred to back then as a commission company. And a commission company is a company, it's kind of like Amazon back in the day. It was a conglomerate that charged a commission to market your goods. Well, it just so happens that his commission company basically marketed everything you need to go to war. Notice I said 1859 because we go to war in 1861 in the Civil War, right? Okay.
Right.
So in 1870, Rockefeller sets up Standard Oil. His younger brother, William, is the vice president. And U.S. Congress later does an investigation and says, here's a quote, "One of the most gigantic and dangerous conspiracies ever conceived," which is what Standard Oil was. Because if you're not familiar with Standard Oil was basically a monopoly that charged. So they basically monopolized not just the oil distribution, but the railroads that were used to do it. And then they transitioned to the pipelines. And pipelines is going to become very relevant here in a minute. But they walked around as the 1,000-pound giant in the industry. And they also were buying up subsidiary oil companies under false pretenses, like pretending that they didn't own them. So in 1878, Standard Oil controls 95% of all U.S. pipelines and refineries, but they do it in a sneaky way. Europe at the time was supplied by a company that was using Russian oil fields that were called BAKU, Baku. And that's very important because it's relevant today. And we're going to get to that. So let's see. I did a thread that basically talked about the Bush-Cheney pipeline deal that had to do with Chechnya. So Chechnya, if anybody doesn't know, was basically a terror organization, scandal, Gladio operation that allowed let me see the best way to explain it. So basically the CIA was piping in Mujahideen and Al-Qaeda into Chechnya to create a terrorist event, which became the Chechnya War. And the reason we were doing that is because I'm trying to think of the best words to use. So here's the pipeline that goes through Azerbaijan. It goes through Russia. They wanted to cut Russia out of supplying European oil. So Baku, that oil company, those oil fields in that location is where it starts by the Caspian and then goes across to Europe, right? So while the Chechnya war is going on, our CIA and Halliburton and all of those guys are building out a new pipeline to cut Russia out. So I want to draw a correlation to that, but I needed to lay that seed right now as we unfold this story, because you're going to find out how relevant that is as I build out this Rockefeller story.
I brought this up while you're talking to kind of aid people with that are visual like me.
Correct.
And it
so
shows
you see where Baku is on the Caspian Sea.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the original line went through Russia. Do you see now it doesn't?
Correct.
Yeah, it did. So they cut Russia out, and they did it while they were faking a Chechnya war against Russia. So Chechnya basically was a Gladio event in order for the deep state or the international syndicate to make more money off of oil so they could cut Russia out of the pipeline deal. That's kind of the nuts and bolts of it. So that's important to know.
Every time you talk about how they import people that look like people to create issues, our southern border the last 3 years, this makes me so nervous.
Correct. I agree. Okay. So in 1882, Standard Oil has moved their headquarters to New Jersey. They were in Cleveland, which is probably why Cleveland was so corrupt for so long. And they set up subsidiaries, a network in almost every state, not every state, but almost every state. And then in walks a guy by the name of John D. Archbold, Archbold. He's a Rockefeller business associate that has lots of congressional connections. And he basically becomes Rockefeller's partner. And let's see. And it's not coincidental that the Office of Naval Intelligence is also created in 1882 and becomes an intelligence function that is used by all of these people and basically functioned like the CIA does now. Because, of course, during World War II, it was the O&I that was dealing with harbor security and all that other stuff. And, of course, all of this stuff has to do with ports. So naval intelligence is all about ports, right? So if they need intelligence on a port in order to be able to monopolize the commercial going in and out of port, which at the time in the late 1800s was how everything was transported, right? We don't have airplanes. Everything goes by ship. So creating the Office of Naval Intelligence allowed these people under the guise of naval intelligence to be able to gain access to intelligence to keep their monopoly going. So these dates are very important. All right. So here's what Wikipedia says about Archbold. He rose rapidly at Standard Oil, handling many of the complex secret negotiations over the years. By 1882, he was Rockefeller's closest associate and typically acted as the company's primary spokesperson. Rockefeller, after 1896, left business matters to Archbold, where
He's
I'm
like,
sorry.
He's like, I want my fame.
Left business matters to Archbold while he pursued his philanthropy. As vice president, Archbold effectively ran Standard Oil until his death in 1916. John Austin Archbold, as president also of Acme Oil, which is another one of those kind of subsidiaries so they can pretend like it wasn't all the same company, denied that Acme was associated with Standard Oil, but then later was forced to admit that he was both a director at Standard Oil and at Acme. So that's how they were kind of hiding the fact that they were monopolizing the industry without actually acknowledging they were monopolizing it. So he claimed that President Theodore Roosevelt was aware of a $125,000 contribution made by Standard Oil to the 1904 campaign of the Republican Party. But Roosevelt produced letters saying that he didn't know anything about it. And I just want to caution everybody not to believe that, because they always have these things on file because it's called plausible deniability, right? So he didn't give the money back and it had already been spent.
How convenient.
Yeah. So in 1882, let's see. There was, Allen Dulles' uncle is Secretary of State. And he sets up the Secret Service. John D. Rockefeller supplied much of the oil that was needed for any war that or engagement that we got into at all. And in 1912, John Foster Dulles marries into the Rockefeller family. John Foster Dulles married Janet Pomeroy Avery, who was related to Avery Rockefeller. They have like a naming. If you've ever looked at the Bush family, these elites do this all the time. Like George Walker, what's his whole name? George Herbert Walker Bush. So there's a George, there's a Walker line, and it's the Walker line that if you go back to it, that like 5 generations ago, that guy was a slave trader out of England. And he was so evil that his ship mutinied him and killed him at sea.
Jeez.
The Walker guy. But they like repeating the names. Anyway.
I got my eye on all the juniors out there in the crowd.
Yeah. So then in 1915, Alan Dulles is assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Vienna, which I found very interesting. I'd never heard anybody talk about this before. And he begins his career in intelligence, and the U.S. enters World War I a year and a half later after he gets there.
Coincidence. Just a coincidence.
I'm sure it's just a coincidence. In 1919, Rockefeller's Standard Oil empire secretly purchased a company by the name of Humble Oil, literally spelled the way it sounds, Humble Oil and Refinery Company. That happens to be the largest producer in Texas. Humble Oil eventually becomes Exxon Oil. Okay. Humble Oil, if you look at the guy that, one of the guys that co-founded it, he has one of those, another thing that I've noticed in digging into this historical nature of Operation Gladio back to its roots, there's a lot of, I did it in my garage stories. Kind of like modern day bullshit stories of how things happen when we know it happened in DARPA. Facebook didn't happen with Zuckerberg in a garage. It happened at DARPA. So there's a lot of these stories. They didn't just start doing this. So this guy's actually, his name's Walter William Fondren, Fondren. He was orphaned at 10 years old and ends up basically a billionaire. He co-founds Humble Oil with the future governor of Texas. His name is Ross Shaw Sterling, and his brother Frank. So, and oh, by the way, just for grins, Governor Sterling's mansion is a mini White House. Just saying. Just saying. Okay. So, Standard Oil buys into Baku oil fields in Russia in 1920. Let that sink in. 1920, Standard Oil buys into Baku oil fields in Russia. Okay. It's owned by 2 brothers. They're called the Noble brothers. Who were the Noble brothers? Well, there always seems to be a Swedish aspect to a lot of these stories, and this one does not disappoint. So the Nobel brothers, Nobel, yeah, they're from the family that created the Nobel Peace Prize. But let me tell you something about them. Robert and Ludwig were Swedish-born entrepreneurs who founded the Branobel, which is Branobel oil company in Baku, Azerbaijan, in 1876. They were pioneers in the Russian oil industry and made significant contributions to its overall development, engineering-wise. In 1879, they established the Baku-based Branobel Oil Company, which became one of the largest oil companies in the entire world. The Noble Brothers Baku Oil Russian pipeline was constructed in the 1870s. The pipeline was built to transport oil from Baku to the Caspian Sea through Russia, where it was loaded onto tankers for transportation to European markets. The pipeline was approximately 100 kilometers long and was built of steel. The Noble Brothers Baku, pipeline was one of the first pipelines to transit oil from the Caspian area to European markets. So, Europe loved them. And it played a crucial role in establishing Baku as a major oil producing region. The pipeline also helped to establish the Noble Brothers as major players in the oil industry, and their company, Branobel, became one of the largest companies in the world. As significant as an achievement as that is, the pipeline still today is a lasting legacy, and it's celebrated every year in Azerbaijan. That's how big of a deal it is. Ludwig continued to develop the oil industry and made a number of technical and commercial innovations. Among these were the pipelines, and they actually produced oil tankers. They were built in Sweden and then shipped and assembled on the Caspian Sea. Ludwig's dad, Emanuel Nobel, arrives in St. Petersburg, Russia, where he starts a mechanical shop, and he actually left his family in Sweden. He lands a contract with a Russian general who is interested in the Swedish inventor's designs for sea and land mines. Sea and land mines. These are the same people that created sea and land mines, and they run the Nobel Peace Prize.
Because, those are elements of peace.
Correct.
Not death, chaos, and destruction.
Is that bizarre? I'm telling you, history is more crazy than reality, or our present day reality. It's crazy. Okay.
Well, I mean, we do got something on them. We have the life-saving Fauci.
Yes. No, that's true. That's true. All right. So Rockefeller bought the oil pipeline running through Russia, i.e. the Soviet Union, in the middle of World War I. So keep in mind that both Alan and John Foster did all of the legal work for Rockefeller. So they were involved in negotiating the purchase of the Russian Azerbaijan oil in World War I for Rockefeller. Okay. In 1920 and 21, Alan Dulles is assigned to the U.S. Embassy in Constantinople, which is today Istanbul, Turkey. So he goes from, where was he? In Austria. So yeah, now he's in Turkey, and it's actually to the left of there. Constantinople is, and Istanbul, I think, is like, yeah. So it's near the area. So again, he's in the thick of things. So was he there for the State Department, or was he there for Rockefeller, or is that the same thing?
I'm gonna say the same thing.
Okay.
You want to know something cool?
What?
So I typed in Alan Dulles and it brings up a CIA.gov site. The next thing that populates, X Colonel Towner-Watkins. Look here, so everybody can see what I'm talking about because this is freaking cool.
I've talked about him a whole lot. Probably more than anybody.
So number one, this is the CIA, and then there you have it, Colonel Towner-Watkins, and then the CIA again. So
I don't know if I like being sandwiched in the middle of those two, though. All right. So Alan Dulles is at the embassy in modern-day Istanbul on behalf of Rockefeller, and he negotiates with the head of Baku Oil. Keep in mind, Constantinople is where the pipeline would transit into Europe, and Dulles just so happens to be assigned there during the war. But you would never guess who makes an appearance in this story next. And I'm going to get his name wrong. I don't know how you pronounce it, but you'll recognize it when I spell it. It's von Maurenschild. It's Mohrenschildt. Do you recognize that name?
George de Marnschalt?
George is his son. This is his dad. So, Sergei Alexandrovich von Maurenschild, who is a mix of Baltic, German, Swedish, and Russian. Oh, shh. Yes. He is the father of George Morgenshield, who befriends Patsy Lee Harvey Oswald in Texas. So, now let me just set the stage for you. We are in Turkey and Azerbaijan on an oil field, and Alan Dulles is negotiating the purchase for Rockefeller from George's dad, and he meets George there. If you fast forward to 1963, George becomes critical in the assassination of JFK. Okay? Is that crazy?
It is crazy.
He met him in 1920 when he was like a teenager. Okay. So, the CIA director, it appears, would be the one controlling Oswald for decades via this association. And George didn't just start working for the CIA in 1963. He actually worked for him before then. So here's a little entry from Wikipedia. Quote, American petroleum geologist. This is describing George, by the way. Here it is. Anti-communist political refugee, professor, and occasional CIA field agent.
Okay. A part-time, setup assassination.
Part-timer. Yeah, part-timer. Just kill the president. Okay.
That's
so
wild.
Alan Dulles locks up the pipeline for Rockefeller during World War I that controls oil to Europe. And then, of course, we're in the war then, him controlling the oil for Standard Oil. And then fast forward to World War II. Well, why wouldn't you go back to war? You're going to make a lot of money off of it. All right. And Alan Dulles meets George during this trip. And Morgenshield then immigrates to Belgium in 1940. What was going on in 1940? Oh, World War II. where Alan Dulles was in Switzerland running the European theater for the OSS, the precursor for the CIA. And he just happened to be next door in Austria. What? Yeah. And then he moves, after World War II, he moves to the United States. So it's crazy. So Dulles is the European director of OSS and uses George to sell Texas Humble Oil, which is Rockefeller's oil, to the Vichy French forces. And for those of you who don't know what that is, during World War II, there was an element of the French government. It kind of split. You had one element in the form of the fans of Charles de Gaulle took refuge in UK. And then you had the Vichy, which were the people that wanted to keep Algeria a colony. And they kind of broke off and went south and was kind of rabble rousing against the Hitler. And so that's who they're basically funneling oil to the rebels. They're not good people, but at least in this case, they were doing something positive in fighting back against Hitler. At least that's what some people believe they were doing. There's this jury still out because there was a lot of them that was actually apparently dealing with Hitler. Because I don't know if you know this, in many cases, like Ford, they continued to produce products in France even after it was overrun and taken over by Germany. Crazy. So, of course, George and his wife ends up being the star witnesses at the Warren Commission that Alan Dulles basically ran after the JFK. So had it not been for their testimony of the implications of Oswald in the assassination, there's no way on earth anyone would have believed anything. They were literally the key witnesses in the Warren Commission. So you have Alan Dulles not only on it, and he had been fired by JFK, right? So he had an axe to grind. But you also had the two-star witnesses, lifelong friends of Alan Dulles. And nobody knows this. I've never heard anybody talk about it.
I've never heard that.
No. He met him in the 1920s. Did business with his dad. Yeah. It's crazy. It's just literally crazy.
How do you have all these intelligence agencies and nobody can?
So I believe they know that. It's us that don't know it. And that's kind of goes back to the point that I was trying to make with that guy on the spaces that you and I were on, that because it's written in a book somewhere in a library on a shelf does not give it as common knowledge to the American people. Did somebody get up on nighttime television in 1960 and say, hey, everybody, don't believe anything that Alan Dulles said, because these two-star witnesses, he's known since 1920, right? Nobody says that. Nobody's told the American people about Operation Gladio. As a matter of fact, do a search on it. You can't even find it until you and I started talking about it.
Because Dulles is a good guy. I mean,
yeah.
Washington, D.C. named an airport after him.
Yeah. Actually, it was after his brother, but
okay.
John Foster, but yeah, same thing. They don't even have the guts to name it after the CIA director, although that would have been a more appropriate one. Okay. In 1933, Hitler's Nazi Party is on the rise. Japan quits the League of Nations, and the United States recognizes the Soviet Union as a thing because they're about to go to war with them. So you might want to recognize them. In the Netherlands, East Indies. Now, let me stop here for just a second. Most of the European powers would have, like the Dutch, the French, the England had an East Indies, meaning everything like around the Indonesia, Malaysia area. And they had a West Indies, which was basically the Caribbean. So they had two primary trading companies for 100 years. And they used those trading companies to do everything that the government now does. They were their foreign policy. They were their spies. They were their militant. They all had mercenaries. They operated in the form of piracy in many cases. I don't know if I talked about it on here, but England, when they basically took over Aden, Yemen, they stole their coffee trees and marketed them to the world in their East and West Indies company. They literally stole. No one in the world had coffee trees except for Yemen in the 1600s. So England needed a port for coal. Yemen had coal, so they basically staged a false flag off the coast of Yemen, took over Aden, and stole their coffee trees from them, and then sold them around the world.
This is going to sound so funny, but I have to say it. I feel like I need to go watch the Indiana Jones movies again, listening to these areas and all this stuff.
Yeah.
I really do feel like, is there some stuff I'm going to see and they're going to be like, oh, shit, that's
so I think
Gladio.
that's probably true with a lot of movies. I just don't have time to watch them now.
I will report back, Colonel.
Okay, that's a good assignment for you. Yeah, because you have kids, you can watch the movies. All right, so let's see. So the Netherlands, which is Dutch, had the East Indies new oil company formed. It was called Standard Vacuum, like a vacuum cleaner. Stanvac was the short name for it. STANVAC. So in 1934, Standard Oil of California, which went by SoCal, SOCAL, gets oil concessions in the Netherlands East Indies. Okay. So that's important. Hold on. My screen just did something weird. Oh, shoot. It's taking me back to the beginning. Because that ends up being a 10 million acre oil concession. It was like the largest one found. Let me get down to it. Okay. And that was in a place called Sumatra. And Sumatra is part of modern day Indonesia. So if you want to bring up that map, you see Sumatra over on the left in the middle.
Yeah. So for those, if you're looking on the small telephone screen on the top left, you'll see Thailand and Malaysia, a little white island. Right below that is a yellow island, and you'll see Sumatra. So you'll see two little red squares on Malaysia, Singapore, and then right below that is Sumatra.
Right. All right. So
let me see if this one gives us another little look.
And while you have that up, I want people to pay attention to where New Guinea is on the far right side too, because we're going to talk about New Guinea in a minute. So you've got Sumatra on the left as part of what is modern day Indonesia. So Rockefeller, since World War I, had been denied entry into the Netherlands, New Guinea, which is referred to as NNG, or West New Guinea, Dutch's West Indies oil mogul. His name is Henry D. Turdy. I'm going to spell it because that's a weird name. D-E-T. No. Sorry.
Oh, you're good.
D-E-T-E-R-D-I-N-G. Henry D. Turding oversaw the merger of Dutch oil with Samuel's Shell Transport and Trading Company in 1907, and the purchase of Azerbaijan's oil fields from the Rothschilds in 1911. So keep in mind what we were just talking about. You've got Rockefeller, who bought the pipelines of marketing that Azerbaijan oil, and come to find out the Rothschilds actually owned the oil fields. We're halfway around the world. Is that crazy? All right.
They are tapped into everything.
All right. So now in 1935, you get this thing called NNGPM, which is the Netherlands New Guinea Petroleum Management Company. And they start oil exploration in New Guinea. At the time, it was owned 40% by Royal Dutch Shell and 60% by Stanvac and SoCal, meaning Rockefeller owned the majority of it, but it was hidden. And I'll tell you how they hid it. So the breakdown of the 60% would have been like basically 30 and 30, Stanval, which is Rockefeller, and SoCal, which is Rockefeller. But remember what I said at the beginning, they hid the fact that all of these state-owned entities in the United States were really Standard Oil, right? So they called them something else. And then later on, they found out they were all one and the same thing. They all belonged to Standard Oil, right? So it looked like the Dutch Shell Company was the majority owner when in fact it was Rockefeller that was the majority, because he owned 30 and 30 and they only owned 40. Yeah. So basically NNGPM had a Dutch name, a Dutch staff, but was owned by Rockefeller. Now, this in 1936, NNGPM does an expedition, like a bunch of geologists and, petroleum scout guys, to the highest peak in New Guinea. And they discover the world's largest deposit of gold. But they don't tell anybody in 1936. Okay. Today, Freeport, which is located and headquartered in Arizona, is still mining that gold find. And I'll tell you when they finally disclose it in a minute. But Freeport in the United States is still mining it today. That's how big it is. It's like the world's biggest gold mine ever found. But they hide it. Now, keep in mind that this is basically collectively modern day Indonesia, right? So they're going to do something. And I want you to remember the story I told you about the Congo and how they created a whole country out of whole cloth called Katanga to keep the resources out of the Congo's hands and Lumumba. You remember that story? They just made the country up. NATO floods in. They assassinate Lumumba and steal all the resources. So keep that story in mind, because this is about patterns. In 1941, Humble Oil conducts oil explorations in West New Guinea and discovers 26,000 barrels per day capacity, which is the largest ever discovered in Southeast Asia. However, this too gets kept secret because they anticipate any day the Japanese is going to invade. It was rediscovered, and I'm putting that in air quotes, in 1972. After the CIA couped the government and installed their stooge. That way, the U.S. international syndicate controlled the president and the oil and the gold, because this oil had no sulfur in it and it was pure light and needed zero refining. Now, you know who knew the entire time about all of this is the Rockefellers. In 1945, presidents, and this is going to get hard for most people. There's two guys. One guy is named Sukarno, Sukarno. The other guy is named Suharto. Okay. Sukarno and Suharto. So in 1945, Sukarno proclaims Indonesia independent from Dutch colonial rule. But, you know, of course, the Dutch doesn't want to let go because it's got all the resources and they want to steal all the resources. So there's 4 years of armed struggle that occurs. Dutch transfers sovereignty of the Indies, excluding NNG, where the gold and oil is. This is exactly, as I just mentioned, what they did in the Congo. So they're going to keep the gold and the oil. You can have the rest of your worthless land and indigenous people. So the Dutch knowingly hoards Indonesia's gold and oil, all while working with the U.S. to coup a newly independent country. And once Allen Dulles, who is the guy, deposes Sukarno, he installs Suharto, and then magically rediscovers the oil. So,
Of course, textbook.
having started the coup process during the Eisenhower administration, Allen Dulles is reappointed as the CIA director, obviously unbeknownst to JFK. Kennedy begins working with Sukarno, which is a stumbling block for Dulles's real client, which happens to be the Rockefellers. So here comes Kennedy, into the president office thinking he's in charge. But Dulles already has an agenda, and that's to coup the government and give the oil fields to Rockefeller without having to share with the now independent government of Indonesia. And so what happens is Kennedy actually starts a dialogue with the president that Dulles doesn't like. And that causes a problem for his real boss, who's Standard Oil, because they want the oil. And now this supposedly independent president's in my way. And JFK has the audacity to start talking to him, despite Allen Dulles saying he's a bad guy to him. You know, he's a communist and all the normal words that they want to call him. So there's a lot of communication going back and forth over all of these voices of stop talking to him, stop talking to him. And so JFK goes to the point of not only just ignoring them, he sets up a meeting in like January or February of 1964 to go meet him in Indonesia. And within days of that being set up, he's assassinated.
Holy smokes.
So that's crazy shit, isn't it?
It is, because rewind the clock back to Lee Harvey Oswald, the connections that were there, and
Right.
it's this.
You already have your patsy set up. You've got the guy, and they know, because Allen Dulles has worked with all of these oil barons his entire adult life as an attorney with his brother John Fogg. They know everybody in Texas. They know everybody in Dallas. Now, also, let me give you two more connections. The Nuremberg trial judge that heard Otto Skorzeni's testimony, and the prosecutor that basically allowed Otto Skorzeny to walk, were from Dallas, Texas. Otto Skorzeny gets hired by Allen Dulles to be the trainer to create Operation Gladio cells. One of those cells is called the OAS, which was the French Vichy people that were disenchanted with Charles de Gaulle, tried to kill him 20 times and got kicked out. 2 OAS agents were in Dallas, Texas, the day JFK was killed. One was flown out that night by a CIA agent, and one was driven to the border of Mexico by a Dallas police officer. Those are all facts. That part is in Major Gannis's GANIS book about Otto Skorzeny papers. Yeah.
That reminds me of a brief conversation we had with the person I had in contact with when I was leaving Dallas Fort Worth, and all the connections to the people he said he had.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I also just want to mention in passing, and I'm only going to bring this up because this guy's is a Marine. So I earmarked this for you. There's a guy, you can look him up on Wikipedia. His name's Gerald Patrick Hemming, Hemming Jr. U.S. Marine, mercenary, CIA agent. And the reason why I want to bring him up is because if you read about his time, Hemming claimed that in January 1959 that he met Lee Harvey Oswald at the Navy base in Japan, and that he was complaining about Oswald kept bragging about him knowing everybody and basically being an intel asset. Right? So this, if you go down to the next paragraph, it says, like many young Americans, including Frank Sturgis and David Ferrari and Harry Dean, Hemming joined the American effort to overthrow the Batista regime through the efforts of Fidel Castro. So David Ferrari is the guy that flew, he's a pilot. He flew the guy out of the OAS agent out of Dallas. He also was involved in the Civil Air Patrol program in New Orleans, which they also dirtied up Lee Harvey Oswald there. So he played a huge part, but I thought it was critical that this Marine actually was fighting. These guys are all, Frank Sturgis, David Ferrari, and this guy, Hemming, are all CIA assets. And they are fighting on the side of Fidel Castro. So that goes to foot stomp my contention that I have said all along, that the CIA was supporting both Batista and Castro, so that they, no matter who won, they would have an in to try to co-opt them and continue to control Cuba for their drug trade and the mafia.
You know, he's close to home. He went to El Monte Union High School, and he's from the Los Angeles area. I wonder if there's some relatives of him that would talk and share stories.
It would be very interesting, because also you see this Interpen thing that he was a part of. Mm-hmm. He actually was the leader. The Intercontinental Penetration Force is one of those guerrilla units. And look at where it said they trained. No Name Key. That's off the coast of Florida. So they were doing paramilitary training for assassins on an island off the coast of Florida. U.S. territory. So it also says, if you read on, that, let's see, where was that other part? Yeah, this group of experienced soldiers were involved in training members of the anti-Castro group after the fact, when he refused to play ball with the U.S. in dictating what was going to happen on his island, funded by the CIA in Florida. And that they also set up training camps in New Orleans, which is where that Ferrari guy was at. And then look what else it says. I just want to tie all this together and tell people why it matters. In March and April of 1972, while traveling to where? Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, he was able to penetrate a conspiracy to assassinate chief executives and members of Congress of Costa Rica and the Republic of Panama. Now, of course, let me just set the stage here for you. At the time, in Panama and Costa Rica were CIA installed stooges. Do you know what wasn't CIA installed stooges at the time? Well, depending on when in 72, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua, because Nicaragua is where the Sandinistas were trying to survive with the US's constant attacks from the Contras, and the Contras were training in El Salvador and Guatemala. And this guy's right in the middle of all of it.
Which is, so this is what our MS-13 guys, Mara Salvatrucha, this is where they came from. Our Bloods and the Crips, this is where they came from.
They were trained by the CIA.
100%. Are you going to get into the arms trading one?
Yes. All right.
Okay,
Now this gets even more fun because we've actually talked about this guy. So as soon as I read this story, and this is what Operation Gladio does to you. Jerry Hemming was arrested on August 23rd, 1976 for illegal transfer of a silencer and drug smuggling. Do you know what the first thing I thought of? I haven't even read down. You probably already read ahead. Silencer. Do you know who did silencers?
We talked about him. Yes. Mitchell
Warble III. Do you remember me telling you about him? And he owned that terrorist training camp outside of Atlanta, which is Fort Benning.
One of the scariest men alive.
Okay. Well, look down at the third paragraph. On April 14th, 1980, Hemming was arrested and charged with drug trafficking. He was held on $200,000 bond in Palm Beach. He claimed he had not smuggled Quaaludes, but was establishing his bona fides with drug traffickers so he could penetrate their networks. Hemming told Alan Weberman that he was working for Mitchell Warble and Lucien Koenig, who is another CIA operative. Hemming was sentenced to 35 years in prison. It was later overturned on appeal, as was his first conviction, which is just the CIA getting their guys out of jail.
Yep. Because they're protected by double jeopardy.
So isn't that crazy?
It is. I do want to cover something because I was like, holy smokes. On that arms trading paragraph, I'll just start it from the beginning so the audience, because it's going to recover what you just talked about in the first part. Gary Hemming was arrested August 23rd, 1976 for illegal transfer of the silencer and drug smuggling. It seems that this was the point that he began talking about his past work with the CIA. He told one reporter, quote, "All of a sudden, they're accusing me of conspiracy to import marijuana and cocaine. Hey, what about all the other things I've been into for the last 15 years? Let's talk about them. Let's talk about the Martin Luther King thing. Let's talk about Don Freed, the Kubre, and with, the racist term and killers in bed with the mafia in bed with the FBI, the goddamn CIA in bed with all of them. Let's talk about all the people I've dirtied up for over them for over the years."
And then he gets sprung from jail. He's lucky he's not dead.
He must have had his version of the kill switch back then.
Yeah.
That says, if I end up dead, that ain't protecting you guys.
Yeah.
Holy smokes.
Yeah.
And
that's what I'm telling you. All of these things. So you start looking into this one thing over here and you read, because now I've collectively done so many countries, and it takes silencers. I know who made all the silencers for automatic weapons. That was Warburg. And then you go back to him and you're like, oh shit, then that check, and that gets you to this and that.
And for those that are like Mitchell Warburg here, because I know some people are visual like me, it was this scary guy.
Yeah.
Right there. And that's why I remember, because I remember you even saying that one of the scariest men ever. And we went through
he's the whole guy that, if you read down to the bottom of that, he's the guy that did the whole, they killed him. He's the one that did the penthouse Playboy. He was going to do whatever. And then they murdered him while he went out there to a meeting. Yeah.
Cotton Club murder case.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Died of a heart attack at the UCLA Medical Center. I wonder if it was when that other
No, he did
doctor.
not. He was given poison at the party, and then he died at the hospital. Yeah,
Wow.
they killed him.
I wonder if that LSD doctor that worked for UCLA was present, because they're all in one big group.
Yes. Yep. I agree. All right, so there's a mind blown again.
Man, that I'm gonna be looking for some videos and all that stuff on this Gerald Patrick Hemming guy.
Yeah.
I mean, just oh my.
I know as soon as I got to the Marine part, I'm like, all right, I'm saving that one.
I mean, I'm really excited because, obviously I still want to go to the one trail that I've been talking about. I want to go do a recording out there. But while I'm out there, I mean, this all, start researching some family members. Because, even if it's just like, hey, these are some, legend stories within the family, or it may be.
And you're right there. You got to go. I would go ask. I mean, it's just like when I read Major Gannis's book. If I can find that guy, I'm calling him and talking to him. And I did. Because you want to do that.
I'm going to call you. Hey, Colonel, just FYI, there's been a drone in the sky following me the whole time. Just
that's what I told you. When you go to the one Nazi camp, take your friend's dog.
He's talking about raw milk. He's talking about medical mushrooms, and now he's doing this. No, that's too much.
Yeah. When's your court date again?
June 6th. That's the next one. 6/6.
All right.
That's the next one.
So
I'll tell you
that
what.
interview off until after that.
Yeah. I'm gonna put on a Mike Lindau mustache and go in undercover.
There you go. If you shaved off your beard, you'd be an undercover.
I would just go look like a baby. Just go clean face. How can people hear this information, Colonel? Look at all the connections and not be like, okay, like come on, how many times can something happen before it's statistically impossible to be a coincidence?
We surpassed that in month 1.
Yes.
Month 1. Yeah, and I'm like on month 10. So
this JFK one, for all the people that have had suspicions surrounding his death, I have never heard this conversation before.
No, me neither.
Ever.
Yeah. Well, let me tell you why. So this book, you can get. There's another version. Well, it's a different book. It has a different name, but it has a lot of the same overlapping story. That was the first book that he wrote. That book you can't even buy in the United States. I had to go to the professor. That's how I started talking to the professor, because I had to go to him to get a copy of it. So that guy that was on that thing earlier about, oh, yeah, you can get this stuff. Yeah, no, you can't. Not the good stuff.
We were doing a watch party last night. It's called The Conspiracy Machine. And I forget the gentleman's name. But the point is, he's out in the UK. And there was a specific book that was out there at the time. And it's funny that, stuff that's, 40, 50 years ago, and all of a sudden we're seeing that play in real time right now.
Right.
But he was talking about how the UK, it was some type of NGO by proxy, went and was trying to buy all the copies of a certain book that was being published to control.
Yes. Yeah, they did that with the book called Final Judgment. If you've never read that book, it's about JFK's assassination. It's the best book. I've read probably, 7 or 8 books about just specifically about the assassination, because there's been so many written. Final Judgment, in my opinion, was the best one. And they tried for years to ban that book.
Final Judgment. Okay. That's on the list. And is that the same one that you're talking about that you can't buy?
No, no. The book that you can't buy at all, it's not available, is by Greg Polgrain. And I will text you so that you can put it in the show notes what the
Okay.
name of that one is, because he emailed it to me in a PDF. So I could at least just read it, because I'm reading both of them basically at the same time. So far, most of the relevant information for us is in this book too. And this one's readily available. It's JFK versus Allen Dulles, which talks about the whole Indonesia thing.
Well, I'm pumped about that because we have viewers in a bunch of different countries.
Correct. And when I get to, I'll have the rest of it done by our next taping date, because it actually does go into detail about the actual coup itself. And since we've done so many of them and we know how they kind of play out, unless there's some unique thing or an actual overprint of it being the exact same scenario, I probably won't do that next week. But if it does have enough information in there to continue this, we'll do a part 2 about the actual coup itself.
Very cool, because we could probably end up doing a group order for one of our audience patriots that's another country that says I can buy it, and we'll work something out to bless them. Colonel, this is awesome. I'm looking forward to this. I know you have somewhere to be. One more time, how can people follow you on X, and how can people follow you on Rumble?
I'm at Colonel Towner on X. Colonel is spelled out. I'm at Colonel Watkins on Truth Social. I'm at Substack and Rumble at the Colonel's Corner.
There you have it, you guys. If you want more of this, because you're like, Alpha, I don't want to wait all the way till Wednesday, follow the Colonel. She's talking about this stuff
every day,
all the time.
Yep.
So with that, you guys, we ran commercial free. So stay tuned. And I got some pretty cool news for you coming up after these commercials. See you soon.
When I started My Pillow, it was just a problem solution one product company. Well, since then, with the help of my dedicated employees, we now have hundreds of products, some you might not even know about. To get the word out, we're having a $25 extravaganza. 2-pack multi-use My Pillows, $25. My Pillow sandals, $25. And for the first time ever, our 6-pack towel sets, you guessed it, just $25. Our brand new 4-pack dish towels, $25. And I've never done this before. Premium My Pillows with all new Giza fabric, any size, any loft level, even king size for only $25. And there's so much more. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code for our $25 extravaganza. Order $75 and over. Your entire order ships absolutely free.
$75 and up. It ships absolutely free. $25. I am still in shock with what the Colonel just dropped on us right now with all that information. I need to tell her we need to record our pre-show conversations and archive those things for a later release. I'm not suicidal, neither is the Colonel. We love our lives. So any funny business happens, just don't buy any stories about that. I want to bring something up on the screen. Speaking of sponsors and affiliates, this one I've had in the backdrop. Let me go a little bit bigger on this so you guys can see it. But I didn't rock it out, or what they do. I did a soft unrolling of this one. But if you were watching the AlphaWarrior Show yesterday, then you got to see me do an interview with the owners of Pet Club 24/7 that tells you the great, phenomenal things for pets, for horses, and for us humans, for those of us that are human. Here's the thing, you guys. You need to go watch that episode yesterday if you guys didn't see it. I'm actually in a few weeks going to be interviewing somebody that a lot of you will recognize that got probably the worst news in their life. And then by using this product, got rid of it. Now, like they said, not going to say things are cures and things like that because, the powers that be are, they control the tempo of those kind of conversations. But when you watch the show yesterday, you see this thing helps your immune system, helps to, supplement it, boost it, get it back in its thing. But just go through the testimonials, and I'm going to bring the specific product that I'm talking about on here. But one phenomenal thing to do for your pets, but more importantly, a phenomenal thing to do for you guys. And I'm not going to cover all the details of this because that's what yesterday's show was. But I do want to bring up a product specifically in the human section over here. You have Enforce Corelius. I'm going to call it CV. You guys know them hard words for this Marine. You got that at $38.99. Link is down in the description. Or you just, if you're driving, AlphaWarriorShow.PetClub247.com. And that's the number 247. AlphaWarriorShow.PetClub247.com. Like I said, links down in the description. You guys, this stuff is phenomenal. I mean, we could have went on for hours just talking about some of the great stories that they've heard. But one of the things that I want to point you guys to, that when you go to this website, because these are some of the questions I had that we didn't get to cover on the show because I didn't know about it. But when I asked post show, I found this out. So when you go to like this particular product, and this one I bought, I actually have this one. And I just took my first one today. $43.99. But when you scroll through and you get down here, because I was like, hey, when I have people reach out to me and they're like, hey, what do you think for this? Or what do you think for that? Here's the area where you get that information. So like I said, the regular Enforce CV, immune support, immune modulation support. You go over here, Enforce Clarity with the lion's mane. Obviously, you have the immune support, the heart supports heart function, supports blood pressure management, supports mental clarity, supports anxiety, supports ulcerative and digestive management. And let me just tell you, the stories that I'm hearing, I'm like, wow. And I'm going to try to bring those people on the show. So this way, I don't have to worry about the FDA trying to hammer me, because they get to share their testimony with you. So you hear it from their mouth, like I'm going to do with this other guest. But you guys, I just wanted to make sure that you're aware of this. Pet Club 24/7, links down in the description. AlphaWarriorShow.PetClub247.com. And if you're interested in being a part of this, let me know. Reach out to me, and I can help connect you with these people so you can make a commission too. Our wallet is our power. And one of the great things that she explained yesterday too, and I was like, man, I had never thought about that way. Because you guys know me, I'm always saying we got to do this parallel economy. We got to support Lindell. We got to support Zelenko. We got to support all these people on the outskirts, instead of putting our money into the big box industries that are trying to imprison us and kill us and enslave us. But it's actually twofold. Not only are we spending our money over here, but we're taking that money from them. So it's like a double whammy. You guys, this stuff is amazing from everything I've heard. I personally just took my first one today. So you guys, once again, Pet Club 24/7, or AlphaWarrior Show. Sorry, AlphaWarrior Show.PetClub247.com. Links down in the description. And with that, you guys, we will call it a night. AlphaWarrior Show, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. When I'm not doing a podcast, you can catch me on Badlands Thursday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern, with my brother CanCon for Sit Rep. You can catch me Fridays with my brother Dan, radio style, from On the Fringe, as we do a new show, Synchronicity, making a woo-woo great again. I don't know if everybody's ready for those conversations. Those are pretty wild. You can go search out the Synchronicity podcast, get a load of that. We're doing episode 8 this week coming up. A lot of stuff out there, a lot of different content. Sugar from Hollywood Conspiracies is coming back. She has been ready, folks. I just got a lot on the plate, and I'm trying to do time management because I want to make sure all these episodes are quality for you guys. With that being said, thank you. And you guys know who you are, that write these long messages about what these podcasts have done for you and your life and your family. Like, seriously, thank you. Like, you can't, let me pull this off the screen. I can't put a value on what it means when I see you guys take the time to really put the impact that this AlphaWarrior Show is having on your lives. Like, seriously, thank you. That you guys don't know, life can get very hard. sometimes. You heard me talking about the colonel. Got that court date coming up on June 6th. And you guys really help fill my spirit when you reach out. I just seriously, so thank you. And you guys know who you are. And whether it's something short that's a few sentences, or some of you that I'm just like, wow, that's a book. You should have put that in between two hardcovers. And I'm joking. I appreciate it. But seriously, thank you guys. So with that, this is the AlphaWarrior Show. First in, last out. I'll catch you guys next time. God bless. Support the people that support this show.
President's former National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn, pleading guilty today to lying to the FBI.
Flynn knew exactly how the system worked. He knew exactly what the intel world had been up to. He understood its funding. They had to get rid of Flynn.
There was a moment where I just felt like I was drowning. So I'm in there with these other political appointees. They're all supposed to go in there and tell what they believe to be the truth. What they did was they took my assessment and they wanted me to change it. And I was like, I'm not changing it.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
President Obama said, but I do have one specific recommendation. Stay away from Michael Flynn. He's bad news.
Over time, instead of being pounded down below the surface of the ocean, we started to fight. I'm now above the surface.